Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Shovel Knight Shovel of Hope. In the last part, we went and finished off the first section of the map, and now we're heading into the Explodatorium, the lair of Plague Knight. And unlike the first set where I could really recommend King Knight over Specter Knight first, just due to, I think, his stage being easier, I can't safely make a recommendation for a first bet here in the second round, except for maybe Treasure Knight, the one on the bottom of the map, because the difficulty spike between the first and second section of Knights in the game is drastic. Because not only the stage is, I think, a little bit longer, but the amount of instant death hazards or enemies that can easily knock you down into bottomless pits are rampant. With that said, the first major mechanic of Plague Knight's stage is these little yellow platforms here. Whenever you step on a single section of them, after about a second, a giant fire wave will come out of it. So make sure you're constantly moving while on top of them, unless you want to take some damage and potentially get knocked into a pit. We also got birds who drop down exploding potions that can destroy even the dirt blocks we're supposed to destroy to get money. Now, you don't lose out on the money, I believe, if they do that. I think if it has money, it'll still drop it. The bigger annoyance there is that there are certain points later on in the stage where they're going to try and use those birds to either take away the platforms you need to stand on, either to live or just to make it through, or to try and knock you into a pit. I forget which one of those is more common, though. I think the former. Now, as for Plague Knight's bio, according to Yacht Club, sometimes the bomb is mightier than the sword. Deep in the recesses of his alchemical lab, Plague Knight perfects concoctions both poisonous and explosive. Toxin, disease, and death are his playgrounds. Even his comrades give Plague Knight a wide berth, because he spreads more than just the common cold. With an array of mysterious and magical bottles at his side, Plague Knight can be considered the black sheep of the Order of No Quarter. Pros, he's got a maniacal scientific mind, but he also has fearlessness bordering on recklessness. Cons, he's physically weak and is relatively short in stature, plus he's pretty shy at parties. All three of those characteristics, now that I think about it, come into play in the first expansion, because Plague Knight was the first character to get his own playable campaign. I don't remember when that was, though. All I know was that the last one came out in 2019, and that's it. This game technically took place over like I think it was 4 years. And they delivered each time. I think each of the campaigns is a real nice campaign in their own individual treats. Though it's very hard to recommend some over the others, just given I think some of the others are better balanced. More on that when we get to them. Now we're coming up on what was probably the section I died in the most when I first played the game, these barrels. Every couple of seconds they shake, and I guess gases explode the top of the barrels off, becoming platforms. I believe the spikes on these count as instant death, but don't quote me on that. I haven't been touched by them in a while, and I can't honestly recall. However, now they're going to start having two sets that go off in two different timings. This platforming, it's weird. It looks tight, but it is, but at the same time it doesn't look tight and it isn't. There's portions here where you have plenty of time to make the jumps you need, even though it doesn't look like you do. But there's also times where you can very easily get snuck up on if you're being too hesitant. So my best advice, just rush to the farthest edge that you can stand on no matter what, and then wait. Also, we're definitely going to want to not kill these enemies. Thankfully, this is a case of you can scroll some enemies back on screen, others not so much. I think they tend to make it so that enemies you can scroll back on screen are ones you might need to reach higher platforms or are generally weaker enemies, I think. Because this game definitely doesn't have standard Mega Man syndrome. Once we get up here, we want to attack the far right wall, as this leads us to where we can get our relic for the stage. We also have green shield knights, or whatever the hell these enemies are called. The best comparison I can make to these knight enemies, we first saw them in King Knight stage. They're the Iron Knuckles of the game, from Zelda 2. They will very often try to guard your shots. The best advice I could give is to try and pogo off of them enough times, and then try to go in for a quick shot with just a standard strike slash to the left or right of them. But from Chester this time around, we can buy the alchemy coin. Toss a coin for a chance at riches. It's pretty literal. When you throw the coin out, it'll continue moving forward until it hits a wall, and any enemies it hits along the way, if it destroys them, it has a chance to either make them into not very much gold or a lot of gold. Random does decent damage, I suppose, against smaller enemies. It's probably the sub-weapon I ultimately use the least in the game, to be honest. as all the others I feel have a bit more toolkit. The only times I'd say the alchemy coin comes in a lot handy besides just that room is when there are a lot of very weak enemies right next to each other, as otherwise I feel like the coin will just be destroyed too easily by the enemy, and therefore it's just a waste of weapon energy. But you know, the fact I could say that that's like the least useful weapon is a good sign, because most of these relics in this game have their own individual uses if you play around with them enough. Probably one of the easiest to miss by being very impatient with level design. Music note sheets there, by the way. As if you're rushing too hard, you might destroy the platforms behind you and completely miss out on the chance to get that until you either die or come back to level. Also, our mini-boss this time is, I guess he's just supposed to be an alchemist. We got two phases to him. He's going to stand at either bookshelf throwing the various vials at you. I believe the red ones still explode a bit larger than the green ones. Then eventually he'll turn into a Yeti? I don't know what this thing's supposed to be. And just run left and right across the stage, getting faster and faster as he goes. You can either decide to attack him or just pogo over him to avoid damage, but I believe he always ends that phase at the opposite vial shelf. So make sure to place yourself well depending on how fast he's getting. With that said, I think he's also very easy to take out when he's in his Yeti form, because the Chaos Sphere in particular, I think does more hits to him because of just how large his hitbox is. Because even though it's harder to do in this game, depending on the size of the enemy, you can technically get 2 hits in if their invincibility frames run out by the time the hitbox is still inside of them. That is very possible to do on an optional boss fight in the game we'll be doing in 2 or 3 parts, maybe? I actually forget when I do that optional area. More on that later. I also recommend making sure you have the phase locket for this stage, as now we're getting to the point where we have the flame platforms again, but now they go off at a set timing. And some of them, like these, the timing is so precise for my tastes that it's just easier to use the phase locket rather than try to actually time yourself and take too many stupid hits. I think I've only successfully made it over the previous last set of these without getting hit, without using the phase locket once. And I think that was on New Game Plus because I had another item that allowed me to get around them through a different method. Namely, just by going directly over them. More on that when we get to later stage again. Also, I really like Plague Knight's theme. The soundtrack in general, as I mentioned, Jake Kaufman really hit it at home. But we haven't quite reached my favorite 2 songs in the game, because I have a favorite normal stage theme and then a favorite theme, period. Because I consider them very different approaches to music. As we saw it there, and we're seeing it again here, we have a very odd enemy here in that we have, I guess, like, slime versions of Shovel Knight. They will be a bit deceptive in that they'll try to jump over you at first and then pogo stick into you to do their main attack. But as long as you're doing a jump attack, it's gonna die more often than not before it gets a chance to even touch you. The bigger annoyance is I believe they can also destroy dirt blocks in the case they jump on them, as they'll do here. So in the case you're at a point where you want to get a lot of treasure, be careful of them because they might actually hit you. Also, you can get up there to get some extra treasure, but without doing specific jumps with like this particular like Plague Doctor enemy or I think a relic from a later stage, I don't think you can do that on the first playthrough easily. With that though, we're coming up on Plague Knight, and he's not going to get much of a chance to do anything due to his pattern. I'll just tell you right now, his main pattern is going to be throwing vials in various patterns to destroy the floor he's on. Some of the vials will bounce, some of them will just explode on impact, some of them will leave a fire that'll even trace the floor, and I believe the walls. The big thing comes in later on in his health where he'll start summoning some extra help.
Hey, leave me alone.
Show yourself, Plague Knight. Your trickery will not stop me.
Trickery? The fruits of my research are no mere trick. Boom! Now let's have a lesson, shall we? I promise. It'll be enlightening.
Around the 2/3 to halfway point of his health, he's going to start summoning some vats onto the stage, which are about 2x2 block wise in terms of the tiles. If his vials hit that, they cause a big explosion that could do massive damage to you. Or you could trap him with the Chaos Sphere between 2 of his vials and he dies faster than I've ever seen him die before, I think outside of a speed run. That was ridiculous. As you saw in the instant before I defeated him, though, he summoned a bunch of vats at once, and what he's trying to do there is make a giant explosion that completely changes the structure of the floor. Because that's what he tries to do. He tries to make himself hard to hit through his teleporting. But he didn't get much of a chance to do anything with that. You can also notably hit his vials that he throws back at him by hitting him with your shovel blade, and he generally jumps in such an angle that you're more than likely to hit him, but since it only does 1 damage, it's not a very reliable way to take him on. With that, though, we now have access to a few more things around this area of the world map, namely, and more importantly, that town, but oh, hey, look, a unique NPC.
North from Pridemore, west at the Fork. Oh, bother, I must have passed it already.
Well met, traveler.
Oi! Maybe you can help me. I think I got lost. I was trying to... Wait a second, you're the knight with a shovel.
Indeed, I am
The knight with a shovel who's been menacing the village.
I assure you, I've done no such.
You're gonna use that shovel to bury innocent people? Your reign of terror ends here.
Alright, this is our first optional boss fight. This is against Reize, who was the first character we've seen that was designed by a director for the day for Shovel Knight. Because I haven't mentioned it yet, this game was kickstarted. And if you donate $1,000 or more to the campaign, you got a chance to be a director of the day to work with Yacht Club Games to design your own boss or mini-boss. And I believe 5 total got that. As for his pattern, he's going to start jumping around, throwing his boomerangs in such a way that they'll bounce around the area but return to him in such a way that it's very easy for him to hit you. And later on in his health, he starts surrounding himself in a flame shield that can block your projectiles. But if you're fast enough, he doesn't really get much of a chance to do something. He's not too hard in my experience.
Do your worst, villain. Strike me down.
I'm no villain. We're fighting a common enemy.
We are? Why did you say so? Wow, I feel like a fool now.
Think nothing of it, friend. Knights are strongest when they work together.
Yeah, Knight's Code, first vow. Always help a friend in need. Knock him down, Shovel Knight.
And you get his fight theme for doing that. As well as some extra gold, which, you know, that's never bad. So, from this point on in the game, we're going to have a couple more optional boss fights just spawn on the world map. In a vein similar to the Hammer Brothers from Super Mario Bros. 3. It usually happens when you enter and exit an area. This is our second town, though, and this is a bit different than the first town. The only upgrades you can get here are not for your health and magic, but instead for your equipment. More on that in a few moments when we go up to take a look at it. With that said, one of my favorite NPCs in the game is here, and he looks a bit familiar. It's this Toad, who looks a bit familiar to the one we saw in the first town. I'm so grumpy, I'm just not in a good mood. I wish somebody could cheer me up. Well, okay, I'll give it a shot. Why would they just leave the catapult unattended? The operator is out to launch. I'm offended by the fact you didn't like my pun. I will leave you now. Over here to the west, though, is probably the most interesting thing about this area in the case you decide to do it now. And I am, but just not for a few more minutes.
Ah, hats, my greatest passion. Nothing I enjoy more than the crisp snap of a well-tailored berth.
If you talk to those NPCs, you can give them each 1,000 gold to have them leave, in which case another optional boss will trigger. But I'm not going to do that for a few more minutes because I want to make sure I'm fully prepared for this just due to what's up here. Also, you can't grab that music sheet from coming from the east. You need to come from the west. More on that in a few minutes.
This be the aerial anvil. Need an armor upgrade? If you need something forged, I'm your fella.
This guy will forge new armor to you that each have different abilities, for instance, except for the ornate plate, which is just you get a shiny double jump. I'll shine to your jump. Some of them reduce knockback, others make you drop less gold, but the most important one to me is the silver armor, the Dynamo Mail. What this does, in the case you pogo off an enemy twice, or just 2 things in a row, you get a charge slash that does double damage. It's a nice shovel blade you have there, lad. This guy gives you the exact same ability for 4,000 gold, just that you can charge your slash at will. Upgrading your armor here is very much a playstyle thing. You might like the purple armor, which I can't remember the name of, which I believe. I forget if it increases the amount of weapon ammo you have, or how much every single sub-weapon takes. I can't remember. All I know is it makes it so that you can use your magic abilities much more freely. Oh, hi there. It's time for another optional boss fight. You look angry.
Urgh, I can't believe this.
Trouble, friend. Have you lost your way?
Bought the best gear, the slickest armor, and the strongest rope.
Pardon? Are you in need of help?
Those stuck-up order-no-quarter clowns have no idea what they're missing. Hey, you look like a knight.
Shovel Knight, at your service. But I'm not in league with...
So I heard that if you beat a knight, you get to take their title, right?
Please, don't do something you'll regret. I don't want to...
The Great Bear's Knight. Like the sound of that. They'll have no choice but to accept me now. Come on, let's do this.
Alright, Baz is a bit of an odd boss fight. He's swinging his rope around in a circle around him like a lasso. When he's doing that, you can't actively pogo on him. When he's not doing that, he's going to be jumping, using his whip as a whip, and swinging around like he's a damn Belmont. Around halfway in his health bar, he electrocutes himself, though whenever lightning appears on screen, it'll then split from him in the 4 diagonal directions, and if he lands, it'll also track across the floor. This fight can be a little bit busy and is arguably the hardest out of the optional boss fights in my experience, though the next one can definitely be the hardest, depending on how good you are reacting to fast attacks. Damn, we don't even get victory music for that.
No way. Not even my best moves could phase you.
Well fought. If you can accept defeat like a true knight, you'll always have your dignity.
Now they'll never let me into the order. Never, ever, ever.
And he's crying. And if you attack him, you get gold in his tears. I should note, Reize was designed by Danny D. Henderson, and Baz is based off a scrapped character from the old version of Street Fighter II, and was designed by Matt and Wooly, formerly of Super Best Friends Play. With those extra music sheets, though, let's take them over to the bar to make sure we get our stats up as we usually should. Let's see here. Oh, you found the vital vitriol. I was feeling uninspired until Plague Knight threw some unkind of potion in my face. When I woke up, the song was somehow finished. That's concerning. But since I now have extra gold, let's go give those NPCs 1,000 gold each here in town. You can technically get this all back. I only get the first 1,000 back because it's the only time I feel like showing it off. But more on that in a few moments, because after we've taken care of all 3 of them, this. Ah, my precious hats. That's a lovely helmet. So lovely. So lovely. I must inquire, sir, about your curious collection. Travel the land far and wide, I do. Searching, learning, teaching, collecting. All shapes, all sizes, hats. Each one I wear grants me a new power, and your hat looks powerful indeed. Intriguing, but I'm rather attached to my helmet. Yes, about that. Next optional boss fight is against Mr. Hat, and his attacks entirely depend on what hat he's wearing. If he's wearing this German-styled World War I era helmet, he's going to be swinging his sword left and right, and swinging out various projectile swords, but he can occasionally switch out and start using different projectiles, like jumping, throwing plates. But if you're fast, again, he doesn't really get much of a chance to do much. I'd argue, barring Reize, he's the easiest optional boss fight. And you get an extra 2,000 for taking him out too, so that's not too bad. Enough! I know not what came over me. My hunger for hats took control. Your beautiful hat. It's a helmet. Righto! I knew that. Wear it in good health. For now. Right, well, off I go then. Alright, so at this point, you can get that 3,000 gold you spent on the NPCs around here just by finding Mr. Hat around the area. He's first on top of the sign here, as you can see, so you need to go through the armor outpost above us. Then you can find him in the actual airship. And once the catapult spawns here, more on that in next part, I believe, or some amount of parts from here, you can find him up there to get 1,000 each time. Now, there's a couple of shovel upgrades you can grab. I recommend, honestly, grabbing, I can't remember what it's called, actively, the one I just grabbed, which allows you to dig up dirt piles without actively having to mash the attack button. So you can just dig them all up in one fell swoop and not have to worry about pace being ruined, potentially. But you can also just outright get the charge shot. Oh, bother, you found me. I'm so embarrassed. I promise I'll pester you no longer. Here's some gold for all the trouble. And there he goes again, off to the airship. I should note, by the way, Mr. Hat was designed by Alexander Hatman Hatzaketes for Director for a Day. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 5, we're heading after our next boss fight. I believe I go after Treasure Knight? See you guys then.